Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of So Simple with Miss Sarah. Today we're going to learn how to make these fried egg pincushions. They're really easy and really fun. And today's lesson comes from this book, which is called Super Simple Sewing for Kids, and is written by Rosa M. Curto. And this is available at the library if you're interested in checking out more of their fun projects. So let's get started.
Let's look at what supplies we'll need to make our fried egg pincushion. One of the supplies you will maybe want to use, this is an optional one, are some pins. So this will just help basically hold your fabric pieces together. They are optional though, so you do not have to use them because they are very sharp and they can be a little dangerous. So if you do decide to use them, make sure you have parent permission first. You would also want maybe a template. This will be used when you cut out your fabric. So I have a circular template for the yolk. And then I have some wiggly shapes for the egg white. So I have one style right here, one style right here, and a third style. Again, you don't have to use these shapes. If you would like, you can just cut out your own shapes, anything that's kind of wiggly that will look like an egg, and a circle to go in the center. But if you do decide you want to use what I've provided, in the description of this video, there will be some information on how to find this template. You would also want to use some scissors. So I mark my scissors fabric paper because once you use fabric scissors for paper, they just get a little dull. So having them say fabric on them will help you make sure you don't kind of ruin your scissors over time. But if you just have one pair of scissors, that's fine, that'll still work. You will also need some embroidery floss. So this is a very kind of thick thread. This works really well when you're just learning how to sew because it's easier to work with than normal sewing thread. And it works very well with an embroidery needle, which is a nice large needle, which again is much easier to work with when you're just learning how to sew because it's a little bit easier to handle, and if you drop it, you're less likely to lose it, which is good because it can be very dangerous if you lose your needle. So always make sure you put it in a safe place when you're done. You will also want something to mark up your pattern piece. So I have a washable marker right here and some chalk. So you can choose whatever you have. Chalk just might be a little difficult on the white pieces of felt just because you won't see it so well, which is why I also have a washable marker. And speaking of felt, you will want some yellow felt for your egg center and some white felt for your egg base. And lastly, you'll want some fluff. So if you don't have fluff like this at home, that's okay. If you have some cotton balls, you can just tear those up and that will work too, or whatever you can find to stuff your egg center with, because that way we're going to make it nice and fluffy to put the pins in. Alright, let's get started on our next step. So before we can get started, we want to prep all of our supplies. So one of the things you're going to want to do is trace your pattern, or however you decide to do it, onto your felt. So I traced my circle onto the yellow, and I traced my base onto the white. And I chose to use the base number 2 for this one. So I went ahead and traced it. So now all you really have to do is just cut these out. So I'm going to go ahead and cut mine out, and you guys can cut yours out too, okay? Alright, so my pieces are now all cut out. And I use that washable marker I mentioned before to trace my pattern piece. So as you can see some of that purple marker still on the edge of my fabric. So if I wanted to get rid of that right now, I could just take this upstairs and use a little damp cloth and just wash that nice and off. But because I just want to work on my project right now and I won't worry about that till later, maybe I'll just flip it over for now. And I'll clean it later. Alright. So our 2 pieces are ready to go. So now we need to work on the sewing part. So our next step would be to thread our needle. So let's go over how to do that again. So for our next step, we'll need to know how to thread our needle. So you'll need a little bit of your thread. You can cut just a nice good long string and your embroidery needle. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take one end of your thread and kind of put it through the eye of the needle. And it can be a little tricky, so don't give up. But once you get it through, just pull it the rest of the way. Just don't pull it all the way out because then you'll have to do this all over again. And then you'll take your piece of thread and you're going to want to try to match up the ends so they're even. It's a little tricky to show. There we go. So once they're just about even, you can set your needle down. You don't need that at this moment. You're going to take those 2 threads together. This is just one way I tie it. There's different ways to do it, but I wrap it around my finger so I can make a loop. and pull the loop off. So you can see how you made a loop. Take your loose ends and put those through your loop. And then just pull that nice and tight, and you've made your knot. And now your thread is nice and attached to your needle. So you might want to do your knot twice. So same thing, you just wrap it around your finger. Take your loop off, push your loose ends through, just like that. So you have a nice little knot at the beginning of one. And then just pull it all together, just like that. And pull it nice and tight so you get a nice tight knot. And the reason we want to make a knot is so that when we go and we sew through our project, our thread just won't come back out the other side because we won't be able to make any progress otherwise. So now that we have threaded our needle, we are ready to get started. So we have our needle threaded and we have our pattern pieces cut out. So this is where if you wanted to use that pin I mentioned before, you can go ahead and grab one. And what you just want to do with the pin is you want to stick it through one end and bring it back through, just like that. And that will just hold your circle to the center of your egg white. So when you're sewing, you don't have to really worry about holding on to it, because the pin will do all that work for you. But again, if you don't have a pin and you don't want to use one, that's okay. You can get away without using one. Alright, so now everything's pinned up, or just being held together, we're ready to start sewing. So in order to sew this one, we're going to do a different kind of stitch. So if you watched our first video, we talked about how to do a running stitch. And I'll show you what we made that video. So if you want to learn how to make this flower, go back and check out our first video. Because in that one we talked about running stitches, which is this stitch you see all along the edge of our flowers. But in this time around, because we're going to be stuffing our egg, we want a stitch that's a lot tighter. So we're going to be doing something called a back stitch. So if you flip it over, you can kind of see how that difference is. So this will make sure that our stuffing doesn't fall out. And it's very simple to do the back stitch, so we're going to work on that a little bit first, and then I'll let you go ahead and sew yours, okay? So let's see how we do it. Alright, so we're going to take our needle, and starting from the back of our project, so right on the back side, you're going to want to stick it up, and you're going to want to go nice and close to the edge of your yellow, okay? So pull your needle through all the way until that knot hits the back. So once that knot hits the back, you can't go any farther. So I didn't cut this off yet, but see how there's this long extra bit after the knot? And that doesn't look too cute. That's called the tail. And if you want to cut that off at this point, you can. Just cut nice and close to it and throw that little bit of extra in the trash. Alright, so to do our first stitch, we're going to do it just like we did a running stitch. So we're just going to put it right back into our fabric. Just a little bit above that first stitch. Okay, so put it right in and pull it through. And you'll see we have a beginning of our stitch. All right, we have one done. Now to do the next one, we're going to go a little bit above it. So leave a little bit of a gap. And pull your needle up again from the back. Just like that. Now, instead of doing like what we did with our first stitch, and going ahead and moving up another little spot, we're actually going to go backwards now. So this is what makes this different from a running stitch. So in a running stitch, we would just keep moving forward. But in a back stitch, just like the name implies, we're going to keep going backwards. So we're going to go back into our fabric right at the end of that first stitch we made. So we're going to poke through right there. And you're going to pull your needle through. And that is your first back stitch. So you see how close and tight those are? You can't quite tell in the back yet, but we'll see it once we get a few more stitches. Okay? So now to start your next one, you're going to go a little bit ahead of this stitch. And again, stay nice and close to your edge. So go up a bit. And then instead of going forward, we go back. So we go back to the end of that second stitch. And we pull it through. So now we have 3 little back stitches. And you see how in the back how that got really tight right there? How those stitches are really secure together? That's going to help when we stuff our egg. That way nothing falls out. So we'll do a few more together. You're going to want to go up from the back again, a little bit ahead of that last stitch. And pull this all the way through. and then go back to the last stitch right at the end of it and poke your needle back through from the front and pull. There you go, you've done a couple of your back stitches. So now what we need to do is we want to go almost all the way around our circle, but we don't want to go all the way around because we need to stuff it in the end. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do some back stitching as about maybe to right here. And then I'll come back and we'll show you how to stuff the egg and how to finish your stitches, okay? So if you didn't quite get the back stitch, go back and watch that part one more time and see just, again, how you do it. So you go up, a little bit ahead, and then you come back, okay? So you're always going to make your way back with the back stitch. All right, let's get to sewing. Alright, so at this point I've made it almost all the way around. There's just a little opening left, so I'm actually going to take this pin I was using out, and I keep my teacup back here. This is actually my pin cushion I use. So I'm going to pop my pin back in that. On top of my camera. Alright, so at this point we're going to want to stuff our egg. So if you have that stuffing I told you that we're going to need in the beginning, this is the time to grab it. So this actually might be way more than we need, so I'm just going to start with a little bit at a time. And we're going to peel back that opening just a little bit so we can get in, and then you're just going to want to stuff it nice and easy. And you can stuff your egg as much or as little as you'd like, but you want it to be a little fluffy because this is where you're going to poke your pins if you decide to use this as a pin cushion. You want a nice fluffy egg. Nobody wants a pancake egg. Alright. I think that feels pretty good. I'm going to put a little more stuffing. So if you don't have stuffing like what I'm using, cotton balls would work. You can use that to stuff your egg, whatever you have at home. Alright, so once you feel like it's nice and fluffy, you're ready to finish your stitching. So just like you were doing before, you're going to keep doing your back stitch so you get all the way back to that first stitch. So we'll do it a little bit together again. So remember, you're just going to start a little bit above that last stitch you did, and then bring it back. Sometimes your thread might be a little knotty, but that's okay. A little bit above, and bring it back. Okay, and just keep doing that until you get all the way to the end, okay? Alright, so now that you've made it all the way around and you've finished your stitches, we have to tie off our thread. So we're going to cut it free from the needle. And you're going to take your two ends that you're left with. You pull them free. And you're just going to tie a knot. So any kind of knot, so a knot that you use to tie your shoes will work here. Just tie it nice and tight. Pull it tight. And you want to do this twice just to make sure it's nice and safe and your threads will not unravel, which would stink, because then all your work would be undone. And then cutting really close to the end, you're just going to cut those three. Alright. And just like that, you have done it. You have made your fried egg pin cushion. So now if you have some pins, you can stick them inside your pin cushion. If you don't want to use this as a pin cushion, you can use it for decoration. It's also a great place to store your needle so you don't lose it. Alright everybody, I hope you enjoyed that video and I hope you guys were able to make your own fried egg pin cushions. So if you do try this project out, I hope you share some photos with us because we'd love to see what you did. There's a hashtag in the description below, so if you do any, please share them using that hashtag. Alright, we'll see you next time. Bye bye!